Today we're talking about translating eDNA into conservation action, partnerships to support imperiled amphibians in coastal California wetlands by Mitchell Rawlson et al. That is early online in Conservation Science and Practice in February of 2025. So thanks, Brad. I wanted to talk to you about this paper because I was struck by this paper for three reasons. One, I like the idea of eDNA in conservation, but I don't know that much about it. The second is that it seems like this is an example of how researchers work with practitioners. And the third is that we often hear about how hard it is to cooperate with private landowners, and they work on that. So I just want to ask you questions about that as a conservation geneticist. First of all, let's get us all on the same page. What is eDNA? And how has it been effective in conservation?
So eDNA is environmental DNA. So, what is it? It's an entire research program where we take advantage of the fact that living plants and animals shed DNA into the environment, and it's most effective in water. Organisms shed DNA into the environment. That DNA lasts for some amount of time before it is eaten, metabolized by bacteria and other stuff in the water. That makes it very convenient if we want to know, especially the presence absence of some species in that body of water, and to some extent also on land, and to some extent in airborne DNA. So what we have to do is one has to develop a DNA probe, a DNA assay that allows you to say unambiguously, this bit of DNA that I've sampled comes from this organism and not from anything else closely related to it.
The idea of eDNA has been around for a while, but would you characterize it as still increasing in terms of how much we're using it for biodiversity discovery?
Yeah, I think it's made a big push in the last several years. So in my experience, which may be a bit different than the experience of the authors in these papers, at this point, it has almost become a standard part of the sampling protocols with the state and federal agency folks that I work with. To my mind, the lesson learned and the really great thing that they did is they worked with agency partners and they worked with members of the public to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it and why it's important. To be completely honest, I'm not really convinced that whether they did that using eDNA or not using eDNA really would have made any difference. The real point is to be open and clear and including people, including from the get-go in the sampling, design, and experiment, the partners, the agency partners, as well as the members of the public. And people appreciate that. And we all know that. And yet, oftentimes, that doesn't happen. And they were very clear about it, and they also documented it. I think what their documentation shows is that if you appreciate people, they appreciate you. And that makes good sense.
Kudos to Elkhorn Slough. I think they did a nice job of bringing in a lot of collaborators and being inclusive in their process.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And it also may be the case, it may not, I'm not sure, but on the private landowner side of things, where they did get access to a bunch of private landowners, it could be that if they said, all I want to do is scoop up a quart of water and then leave, maybe that's easier than saying, hey, how about I put on my waders and I wade through your pond and I tromp around, and maybe that's an easier lift. My experience again in that, and I've done this for decades with all kinds of organisms in California and elsewhere around the world, is that sitting down, talking to people, explaining it to them, why you want to do this, what's the goal, is the key. And they seem like they did that very well. They have these open houses and public lectures on their project, and any of that always helps. At the end of the day, some landowners are excited to know that they have endangered species on their land. Some landowners are terrified to learn that they have endangered species on their land.
Thanks. That's our review of translating eDNA data into conservation action. Partnerships to Support Imperiled Amphibians in Coastal California Wetlands by Mitchell J. Rawlson et al. in Conservation Science and Practice 2025.